So when we lived in North Carolina, we were introduced to a very Southern phrase. And that Southern phrase was, bless your heart. Now that's such a wonderful phrase, isn't it? Bless your heart. What a great thing it is to tell someone that, bless your heart. The thing that I learned though was that in the South, when you say bless your heart, it's a way of you saying anything else you want to say that is awful and terrible about someone, as long as you end it with this phrase, bless your heart. For instance, man, I'll tell you what, he is as dumb as a post. Bless his heart. You see how that works? See, it's something about this word blessing. As long as you kind of end it with blessing, then somehow everything's okay. Well, you know what? It got me thinking about the word blessing in general. And it got me thinking about this idea of being blessed in general. And what I realized is oftentimes in our culture, when we think of being blessed, we see it as something that is held on to tangibly. Like we're blessed by our wealth. We're blessed by our many relationships. We are blessed by a beautiful house that we live in. We are blessed because of the land that we live in. And blessing often has to do with those things that we can attain, those things that we can hold on to. That's almost the definition of blessing. To be blessed means to have. To have. Well, at the beginning of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, he talked about blessing in a very different way. He talked about blessing not in terms of what you have, but in terms of perhaps what is promised of you. And so let's listen to these. They're known as the Beatitudes. And again, it starts right at the beginning of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Now, Luke has a very different version, or a slightly different version of this that he tells. But in Matthew's Gospel, this is how the Beatitudes sound. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So again, this is how Jesus begins his Sermon on the Mount. And lots of scholars believe that when Jesus was preaching that Sermon on the Mount, he was preaching to peasants. He was preaching to those who did not have. And he was preaching to those who probably saw this idea of blessing as being able to look at all that you did have. And so they might look at the rich, they might look at the powerful, they might look at those who were in charge and say, man, that is someone who's blessed. And oftentimes what ended up happening was bad theology came into that understanding, because they would look at that and they would say, God must love them better because of all that they have. God must love them more than me, because if God loved me the same way God loved them, then I would have more. But what Jesus does in the very beginning of the Sermon on the Mount is he says, your blessedness is not related to what you have. In fact, blessed are you who have less, for your reward is greater in the end. And you know, I've been thinking about that, and I often find myself getting into that same trap that I think those who were listening to Jesus gotten themselves into. I look at all the other things that other people have, and I label that as being blessed, when in reality, if you begin to strip away all those things, if you begin to strip away all of the things that we have, our wealth, if you begin to strip away all of our talents and all the things we hold on as our personal abilities, if you begin to strip away all those things and are left with nothing, and still you understand that God loves you, and God cares for you, and God has made you and rejoices in you, then perhaps that is the beginning of understanding what blessedness is as Jesus saw blessedness. You know, right now we are in a place where we are doing without. Some of us are doing more without than others. And for many of us, we may find ourselves asking, why are we so cursed? Why do I feel cursed? When Jesus tries to take it and turn that whole thing around and point not to this idea of being without as a curse, but perhaps it is a blessing, because we can truly begin to understand that God's love for us is not because of what we have. It is completely because of who we are. So, I would say bless your heart, but I don't want to have you think I'm trying to say something terrible about you. So instead, I will just say be blessed. Be blessed in the fact that God has made you as you are and loves you as you are. Be blessed.